he's setting me up, I just want to say that Tonawanda is where the shelter is, but what you all know is Buffalo, right? So I'm from the county that Buffalo is in. So what do you think of when you think of Buffalo? Snow, right. Wherever I go, and I speak all over the United States, that's what everybody thinks of Buffalo. And I just don't want people to think that's all Buffalo is. As a matter of fact, I live in the city, and while maybe a mile and a half from me, they got 7 feet of snow. I only got 6 inches at my house, okay? So I want to replace the thought about snow and Buffalo with something else. One of our presidents is, well, a couple of our presidents are from Buffalo, but one in particular was this dirty old man named Grover Cleveland, who became the bachelor president in the early 1900s, or the late 1800s, sometime, you know. And he was an attorney in the city of Buffalo, and he had an 18-year-old ward. And he married her, so he wouldn't be a bachelor president anymore. He was 46, so I don't know. Anyhow, after they were in the White House, he and his wife had a baby. And something of incredible note happened because of this baby being born. And I'm wondering if anybody knows what that is. If I say something like candy, can anybody figure it out? Maybe if I tell you the baby's name was Ruth. Baby Ruth bars, right. So now when you think of Buffalo, I want you to think not of snow, but of candy and Baby Ruth bars, and not of dirty old men either, just Baby Ruth bars. So I brought you some Baby Ruth bars, and if you want to give them to the crowd so you'll remember me nicely. And let's see, I'm going to be talking about community cats. I don't know how much we're really going to talk about the Northeast, because community cats are community cats. So how do you make this work? Just the arrow? Okay. So I'm thinking that what we need to do first is really define community cats, because I think it's really important when you're looking at whatever you're calling community cats, you have to have a good definition of what that is in order to be able to provide programs for them. In fact, I think it's really imperative that you begin to question your notions about what a community cat is and what a community cat isn't, so you can move forward to help them. So what are community cats? Are they ferals and stray cats? I think that's what most people think of as community cats. But I actually believe that feral cats can be potentially any cat. Your cat can be a community cat. So, you know, we think about where did cats come from, where do we first start noticing them, and generally speaking, we think about ancient Egypt, where it's believed by many that the community cat was first self-domesticated. Did so because there was an abundant food supply for them, and by finding the food supply, they created the most important program for human beings, and certainly most important program for most of you veterinarians who are agriculture vets. Only because of the cat were we able to become an agriculture-based society, because we could store grain. There was no other animal that could be put where grain was stored that didn't also eat grain. As we know, cats are complete carnivores, and they're not interested in eating the grain. Other animals that might have killed rats and mice also might have eaten the grain. So they allowed us to store grain, and we really created our whole agriculture-based society on the backs of cats. And therefore, they got really, really important in the pagan religions that were practiced in Egypt at the time. And most of the goddesses had some form of cat incarnate in the whole goddess thing, you know, because they would be cats and women. They would be important to childbirth. They'd be important to home. They'd be important to food. A cat around a house created a situation where people had more food to eat, where there were less problems with snakes, with bugs, with other rodents in the home, and so the families were healthier because of cats. So they were very, very, very important. And the roles that they played in Egypt followed them into Europe, and the goddesses may have changed their names when they got to Europe, but they continued to be the same goddesses and the same sort of import and the same sort of cat importance in our whole society as it was. And that went along pretty well until about 300 AD when the Constantine, who was a pagan, joined the Catholic Church, and we got the Roman Catholic Church, the first kind of state and church connection. And after that, the Roman Catholic Church really tried to demonize anything that was pagan. And cats and women became huge victims in this. And literally for 1,000 years, cats were ordered to be killed through the Pope and other Catholic reaches out into Europe. And one of the tragic things that happened because of this was the Black Plague getting such a big foothold in Europe because most of the cats had been killed. The brown rat had been in Europe since like 900 AD, you know, so, and the plague didn't start till like the middle 1300s. So the brown rat was able to proliferate because the cats were all killed and half the population died on the earth. But that was then and this is now. But cats are in our community, have been in our communities throughout our Western history. They came to the United States with us. They have lived side by side with us. They have been in our communities, and they've been loosely owned, okay, by us for millennia. I can't even say they're loosely owned. They're there, okay? And, you know, the idea of a cat as a pet or a cat as an indoor animal, you know, really didn't get any foothold. It's about the same age as I am, okay? Because, I know that because kitty litter was invented the same year I was born. So prior to that, people used ashes if they chose to keep their cat in the house. How many people wanted cats walking ashes around their house? I'm telling you, cats were in and out, loosely owned in the street. Is someone going to tell me how much time I have? Because there's nothing here. So, okay, all right. So when Wikipedia defines feral cats, they say it's a domesticated cat that is returned to the wild, blah, blah, blah. And it's distinguished from a stray cat, which is a pet cat that has been lost or abandoned, while feral cats have never been socialized, blah, blah, blah. And we're not arguing that feral cats are community cats, that they live in the community. But when they describe stray cat in Wikipedia, I think this is the definition that most shelter people use and most people use, that a pet cat is a stray cat that has been lost or abandoned, right? Well, I want to look at this a little bit. So I pulled the stats from your Michigan shelter survey. And the second column, the third column over here is the cats that came into your shelters. Now, it doesn't tell in those reports how many of those are stray cats. So I've kind of had to guess that the national average of cats entering shelters is someplace between a third and a half. And so I'm saying a third just to be conservative here, which would make your stray cat population in Michigan in 2013, 30,323 cats, okay? Of which only 2,424 were RTO'd, according to your reports. That's less than 1%. Also, if you look at dogs, it says you're returning 78% of stray dogs. I think that's probably incorrect, but if I'm using national averages and I had to, it looks like you're returning 78% of your stray dogs. So why is there a difference? Why are stray dogs going home and stray cats not going home? Well, clearly there's differences between dogs and cats and that influence RTO rates, but 78 times more often dogs are going home than cats are going home. Well, that's from shelters. We also know from a study in Ohio that if you just leave stray cats alone, 13% more will get home than if you take them to a shelter. So right off the bat, we know that taking stray cats to the shelter is not the greatest thing for cats, right? Our own research in Buffalo indicates they'll get home almost 25% more often if we just leave them alone. We got that data from a point where we had a waiting list and we had to extend it to stray cats, and we kept our eyes on the stray cats, and this went on for about 4 months, so it's only a 4-month look. But 25% of the cats who were on our stray cat waiting list got home without any problem whatsoever. But still, people who lose their cats and never find them statistically are a much, much larger group of people than those people who lose their dogs. Now, I think this is an owner myth that we tell ourselves in shelters. It's certainly a myth, well, in my opinion, a myth, that I've heard forever and certainly believed in for a long, long time, and that cat owners don't look for their cats when they're missing. The cat owners don't care about their cats. That all the problems cats have are because owners are irresponsible and just don't care about cats the way dogs do, or the way that dog owners do. I'm beginning to think that that's really kind of a load of bull because there's just too much information. Do dog owners really like their dogs 78 times more than cats like their cats? I don't believe it. How many of you own cats in here? If they got lost, how many of you don't care? Can you cat people put your hands up again? How many of you have a cat that you just found? Yeah. Okay. Well, someone's looking for it, right? So here's a quote I found online when I was looking for information about stray cats. It's Jane Weatherford from Brown County Humane Society. She was writing about cats, and she says, 0 cats were returned to their owners in the first 3 months of this year. Last year, 17% of the dogs were returned to their owners, while only 4% of their cats were returned to their owners. Her conclusions were owners of cats don't care as much about their pets as dog owners do. Cats are irresponsible. Dogs are valued more than cats. Cats get lost easier than dogs. How many of you kind of think this is true? And it's okay to say so. Oh, nobody? Thank you. Because most people in shelters would totally say the same thing. Probably 20 times a day, every time a stray cat comes in. Why isn't anybody looking for this cat? It's such a nice cat. Clearly it was owned. It's in good health. Where is the owner? What's the matter with that person? I mean, I've been hearing this and believing it pretty much for my entire career. So here's my theory about stray cats. Many stray cats are not lost at all, nor are they abandoned. They choose not to go home. They are comfortable living on their own. Food is fairly abundant. They are, as many have always believed, self-domesticated and, when possible, make their own choice where to live. That's really what I have to say to you today. That's what I want you to put in my mind, but we're going to talk about some other stuff. But I really think that those of us who are in the animal welfare field have to stop putting our own thoughts on cats and accept cats as what they are. Are there any problems with cats in shelters in Michigan? Huge problems, not just in Michigan, but across the country. Our shelters are overrun with cats, okay? Because we think they need our protection, okay? So, in my opinion, any cat is potentially a community cat, a cat that's living on the street. But my opinion is that they kind of choose to do that. How many of you have a cat that's gotten out? Okay. And maybe had a bad time of it when they're out there. You know, they're in the snow, or they're in the heat, or they come back and they're thinner, or whatever, right? Yeah. The next time the door's open, don't they try to get right out again? No, your cat doesn't. I'm not saying there aren't cats that want to stay at home. There are cats who want to stay at home, but I think that there are a lot of them that don't care that much. So what happens when we take these community cats into shelters? Well, probably in most shelters, and I'm not necessarily talking about your individual shelters or the shelters you work with, but across the board, I would say that ferals are most often euthanized when they enter shelters. Social cats are treated as strays and held for 5 days. Even in Michigan, where you don't have such a law, you're generally holding 5 days on a stray cat. After the 5 days, many of the cats have upper respiratory infection. And again, unfortunately, in most shelters with resources the way that they are, URI cats are often euthanized. If they're treated, then they have an extended length of stay. And a very, very small percentage of them are claimed by their owners. But they cost shelters a huge amount of money. So what I think many of you are looking at today, and I hope you continue to look at, is neutering and returning all healthy community cats to where they came from. There are several programs in the country that are doing this, and they're very, very successful. We know that these cats, when they come to us, we wouldn't neuter them and put them back on the street if they weren't doing all right anyhow, right? I mean, none of the vets are going to neuter an animal that's sick or weak or underweight. So these cats are coming in, they're looking good, they're looking fine. They have a home. It might not be the home that SPCAs think every cat should have, but they have a home and they're doing fine. So why not put them back there? If you choose to help them by admitting them to the shelter, the healthy community cats, you'll probably be doing the opposite of helping them. You are putting them in harm's way. So I think we need to change our language, start talking about cats when they're reported to us as lost, describe them as missing, okay, instead of stray, and when they're found by a community member, let's start calling them community cats. Get rid of this word stray and reserve it for cats who come in who have some form of identification, whether it's a microchip, a collar, even a collar with no tag, but some sort of collar certainly indicates that there's an owner. Tattoo, anything like that, that indicates this cat has a home. Because the cat has a good coat, because the cat is in good weight, because the cat is healthy, does not mean that it has a home. So here are the costs for my shelter in 2013 of bringing in stray cats. So we had 1,366 adult cats. Average length of stay was 19 and a half days. Total care days, 26,637 at $10 a day. That's 266,000, okay? And the stray cats that came in that we deemed were under a year, 2,098. The cost for them was $832,000. So that's over $1 million that my one organization spent housing and caring for strays. So what does Michigan look like? So if we go back to the assumption that Michigan held 30,000 stray cats, and let's give a fairly moderate 25 days for the cats. When I looked at some of your length of stay figures, they were way above that, but we'll just say 25 days across the board at $10 a day. It's $7,580,750 that you shelters in Michigan are using holding cats that are strays for owners to come in and get. $7 million. It's an incredible amount of money. So what else could you do with that $7 million? So if every single stray that came in was not sterilized or vaccinated, at the cost of about $80 a cat, and I'm using the cost of our local clinic to low-cost clinic in Buffalo, to neuter them all and vaccinate them all would only be $2,425,000. And let's say you kept them 2 days, the day they came in and got sterilized and the day that they're going back to the community, $660,000, $5 to put every cat back, $151,000. So your total costs for the total cost in all of Michigan to sterilize every stray cat that you're now holding 5 days would be $3,237,915. That would be a savings for Michigan shelters of over $4 million. $4 million that you could really help cats with, instead of just wasting this money by holding these cats, getting them sick, holding them longer, or worse yet, having them die, whether it's through sickness in your shelter or whether it's just overcrowding and you have to euthanize cats. So what are your benefits? Cats who do have homes to go home to might go home, but they're going to go home sterilized. Okay? There's nothing to keep you in Michigan from doing this. But even if they don't have a home, life's going to be a little bit easier. They're going to be sterilized, they're going to be vaccinated. It's just going to make life easier. You're going to have fewer cats in your community. You're going to have many fewer cats in your shelters, and you're going to have fewer cat complaints. There's more room for cats in the shelter. Imagine getting rid of 1/3 of the cats that come in your shelter like that. How cool would that be? You'd have more funds to care for other shelter cats. You'd save hard-to-acquire donor dollars. Reduces your incidence of URI, and most importantly, it saves lives. Okay? So in San Jose, California, where they've been doing this program from 2009 to 2014, here are some of the results that they're seeing. I talked to this guy. I asked him if he ever had a complaint from anybody's cat who he sterilized. And in all the years that they've done this program, he's never had a complaint, somebody calling and saying, gee, you sterilized my cat. One person was upset because its ear was tipped. One person in 5 years. That's pretty incredible. So in 2009, they euthanized 8,466 cats. 8,466 cats. That's a lot of dead cats. By 2014, it was 1,954 cats, a reduction of 76%. Okay, and those are raw figures. That doesn't say that they were healthy cats or unhealthy cats or owner requests or anything else. They're just straight euthanasia statistics. Dead cats on the street by animal control, picked up in the street, declined 20% in that time. So clearly, by having this study, they've shown that with the fewer cats and the more well cared for cats in the community, they're not dying on the street. They're not getting hit by cars as often because simply there aren't as many. The cats euthanized for URI declined from 736 in 2009 to 7. That's a 99% reduction. How many of you are struggling with URI in your shelters? Really? That's it? I need your secrets, because it's a struggle, and it's really, really hard on the cats. So the save rate for cats in San Jose was 29%. It's now 76.7%. So pretty impressive increase in their save rate through a shelter, neuter, and return program. I guess that's what it's being called now, is shelter, neuter, and return. So you've been making some great progress in Michigan in cats. You can see that your cat intake has gone down quite a little bit in that same period of time that San Jose did, from 2009 to 2013. And euthanasia has certainly come down. Your admissions down 40%, euthanasia down 62%. So that's really, really good. But it's not good for the cat that's sitting on the euthanasia table that isn't as lucky as the ones who got a home or had a program to go for, or never got picked up in the first place. So what are the concerns with doing this program? Particularly, this is where the northeast part comes in. So we've got winter, wildlife, staff buy-in, community buy-in, and will the cats be okay if they're returned? So should we be concerned about winter? This chart is from Canada, and it shows how many, this is really about feral cats, but I don't think there's a huge difference between feral cats and any other cat that's on the street. And it doesn't seem to have any correlation, the latitude and the number of cats per human population. So this is 1,000 number of cats per 1,000 people. And whether it's at Vancouver, which only has feral cats 12 per 1,000 at 49-degree latitude, or Winnipeg, which is at the same latitude, and they have 157 cats. So I think probably I know Vancouver's got an awesome animal welfare program going there. So I think that's really a lot more about that than it is about latitude. So this just shows they're really, and then you have 295 at 49 at latitude in Halifax. So they're doing just fine in Halifax. And that average January temperature in Halifax is minus 5 degrees. So that's kind of cold, right? So I know from our own stuff that our own data, certainly in the 1990s, we were euthanizing every feral cat that came through the door. I was totally bought into the thoughts of the days that feral cats lived terrible, miserable lives, and it was a kindness to euthanize them. And I was challenged, and so I started looking at the feral cats who were coming to us. So we tracked all the feral cats that entered the shelter. We actually did it more than a year, but in 1 year we had 900 cats. 73% of the cats post-mortem showed to be healthy. They had good coats, no external parasites that we could find. Their teeth were good, and they were in good weight. On the basis of looking at that over a year, I went to my board and I said, I know that we don't refuse animals, but I think that it's time to change our policy and start refusing to accept feral cats into the shelter. And we did so. We haven't taken any feral cats since then, but we've worked hard with local feral cat groups to offer as many opportunities as we can for them to sterilize or help with them. As a matter of fact, our shelter has given money every year to the local feral cat neutering program to continue their progress. So we stopped accepting feral cats, and the world did not fall apart. In fact, the community bought into it immediately. So when cats are with cold, generally I think they're really okay. Cats have a way of being able to find a place to stay. They're not very big, and they can find a nice warm place, but we can help them, particularly if we're going to be sterilizing cats and returning them in winter, which, by the way, is really the important time to do this. If you think about cats and when they're going to go into heat, they're going to go into heat in January, okay? And they're going to be pregnant in February and March. They're going to go and heat again after they have more kittens. But that's to me the big problem with the number of cats who have accidental litterers. And this is my whole theory on Christmas and cat overpopulation. But basically, the majority of our kittens are 6 months of age when the traditional veterinary community is neutering in November, December, and January, right? That's when the opposite of Kitten Mountain in the summer, they're 6 months old. And if they're not, and you know, Joey's got to have that new train. I mean, who's going to go out and spend several $100s on a spay-neuter surgery in November or December? They're paying their bills in January. So I think we have a problem there. If we can just lower the age, veterinarians, to 3 or 4 months, and there's no reason not to, then you're going to save a lot of kittens from ever being born if it becomes part of the wellness package. And when do you give rabies shots here? 3 months or 4 months? So sterilize the kittens with the rabies shot, and if you don't know how to do it, come and see us. We'll show you. So, but at any rate, I don't think that cats are having much problem with the cold, but you can make really simple shelters for them. I particularly love this one. It's just one of those things that fits inside of a cooler, right? You just cut a hole out of it and put some straw in it, and there you have a nice cat place. And as soon as they figure out how to get in and out of it, you can just tack up a little curtain, and then they're even warmer. So you can certainly provide places for cats to be warm if you are worried about them. So wildlife, there's no question that cats kill wildlife. What I don't understand about this argument is if you're making fewer cats in the community, isn't that a good thing for wildlife? I've never understood the objection of the wildlife community to TNR programs when you're actually lowering the number of predators in the community. So I just don't get it. It's not, you'd have to kill all cats, and we know that's not an option. It can't be done. So removing cats through lethal methods is just a waste of money. So staff and community buy-in, start small. Tell your story by your victories. Show your lower euthanasia rates, your lower URI incidents, more adoptions. Share your information from this workshop about the money that you're saving that you can use in other ways. That the kindness that you're really doing to cats by not taking them in the shelter and harming their health. Thank the public for your help. Make them your partner. They will get it easier than you do. We are so inundated with these messages of we have to protect animals that we've, in a lot of ways, lost our good sense of how to take care of animals. And they'll get it, And I think there have been enough studies of the public and asked them, what do you think should be done with cats on the street? Should they be killed? Should they be taken to the shelter? Or should they just be left alone? Overwhelmingly, the community has said leave them alone. And you can see in this graph, the big part of it is saying leave the cats on the street. Will they be okay if they're sheltered, neutered, and released? So again, I went back to my stats. Hope you're all keeping stats because they really tell you a lot of information about the programs that you have. So I'm finding that 31% of the cats admitted by their owners in 2013 were ill or injured, okay? And 28.9% of stray cats admitted during the same time were ill or injured. So it's roughly the same, and that's what I was finding when we looked at feral cats, that 72 or 73% of them were healthy. It's the same stat over and over again, okay? And so I think that there's enough information there, but it'd be great if somebody did a real study on that. I mean, this is just my information, okay? And so it appears that cats with no known owners entering shelters have about the same risks for illness and disease as owned cats do. So one shelter worker said, when they were contemplating doing this, while we were contemplating, agonizing, arguing about whether it was better to euthanize an unadoptable cat or alter it and put it back where it came from, I was walking through our feral cat room and saw a cat that had come in with a tipped ear and a post-it note on it that it would be re-released where it came from. It struck me that I had the ability, as a vet, to alter a cat and tip its ear, and if that's all it took to save its life, why shouldn't I? That's all it takes to save that life. It's a no-brainer. So what must we do? We're doing a better job for cats than we were a decade ago, but it's not enough. 30% of all cats admitted to shelters are euthanized in this country. And nationally, 3% of the cats that enter shelters in the United States die in the shelter, presumably of disease they caught in the shelter. 3%, that's a huge amount of cats, 3% of all the cats entering shelters. We owe it to the cats that are supposedly in our care to examine our beliefs every day, as well as our programs, and learn how we might improve what we're doing. How many of you have actually ever read The Tiger in the House by Carl Van Vechten? Who's this crazy cat person. And I think he really, his book from 1922 is really, really very cool, and you can read it online. But he ends the book and he says, but the cat will survive. He is no such fool as man. He knows that he must have nature behind him. He knew this in 1922. I'm asking us to relearn it in 2014. He also knows that it's easier for one cat alone to fit in the curves of nature than two cats. So he walks by himself. For nature here and nature there are two different natures. And what one cat on the other side of the fence has to do is not what another cat on the other side of the fence has to do. But the great principles are obeyed by all cats to such an extent that 20, 100, 1,000 cats will willingly give their lives, which they might easily save, to preserve an instinct, a racial memory, which will serve to perpetuate the feline race. The result will be that after the cataclysm, after the mounds of heaped up earth, the piles and wrecks of half-buried cities, the desolated fields of grain, and the tortured orchards, the cat will stalk, confident, self-reliant, capable, I don't know that word, and philosophical, and he will bridge the gap until man appears again, and then he will sit on new hearths and again will teach his mighty lesson to ears and eyes that again are dumb and blind. So Carl Van Vechten knew that. I'm beginning to know it again. I hope you all can rethink the cat, find ways to help the cat that don't harm them, and see if we can't come up with a new program for cats in our community, okay? And I have maybe 1 minute for questions. And if you have questions, ask them now because I'm leaving. I have to go back to our crisis in Buffalo. So I think you have to come up here. I'm not sure.
Well, you had me with the Babe Ruths, but it went down from there. I'm the wildlife veterinarian here at the college, and you gave us one side of a very complex issue, and I want to raise the question of you admitted freely that they do kill a lot of wildlife, but totally ignored the fact that they are a reservoir for disease that affects wildlife in negative fashion as well as people. Mm-hmm. Along the West Coast, especially, marine mammals are affected with toxoplasmosis and panleukopenia and rabies.
Right.
Even in Michigan, we've had humans exposed to rabies from feral cats.
Right.
And I'll raise the issue, what's the difference between a feral cat, a feral swine, or a feral mustang? They're all non-native species that were domesticated that got away.
Yeah.
And letting them go back to the wild when they have such a negative impact on wildlife, it's kind of hard to justify. And actually, PETA is opposed to that because they address the welfare of cats.
But that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying reduce
well, my
their
question
numbers.
is, can you say that saving cats and putting them back to the wild, what about all the other animals negatively impacted? Don't they have a chance for welfare too?
What I'm saying is they're already there. We're never going to stop the proliferation of cats. In order to stop that, okay, you have to kill them all. And I believe the only place that's ever been successful in killing all cats was some island. I can't remember what island it was. It took them 20 years and something like $14 million to kill all the cats on this small island. It cannot be done. So what's the next best thing? At least get them sterilized and reduce their numbers. I have a wildlife program at our shelter too. Most of the animals that come in are victims of cats. I totally get where you're coming from. But the same thing, the same argument that I have for neutering them and having them in the community is the same. It follows the same thing of all the diseases that you're talking about. You're going to reduce the number of diseases. You're going to reduce everything by having programs
scientific research doesn't support that, but the concern about
there hasn't been enough
diseases
of
and
it to
parasites.
really study it, except for San Jose at this point.
Well,
Yeah.
I think one of the solutions is euthanasia. You say 8,500
But who's
cats
going to
being
do
killed.
that? Are there shelters represented in here? We're not going to euthanize the cats. You're going to have to find somebody else if you want them killed. We're out of that business.
Well,
Am I right?
this is a welfare symposium, and
Yeah.
euthanasia by definition is humane. So that's all I'm going to
Yeah,
say.
but
Thanks.
I would disagree that euthanasia is humane if an animal is suffering. For an animal who is healthy, I think we've used that definition way too long. I believe, and here's another thing I would ask you to take back, that if you are euthanizing healthy animals or even treatable animals, that's killing. It's not euthanasia. Euthanasia was always a word that had to do with suffering. And I was a long time coming to that, but I'm totally bought in at this point that we in the animal welfare field, when we talk about euthanizing animals, that it should be to preserve suffering and not to kill animals who are a nuisance, okay? So another question? Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Nancy Frank with Michigan Department of Agriculture, and just wanted to thank you for your presentation this morning. I'm sure it's going to stimulate lots of discussion even after you have to head back to Buffalo. I just did perhaps want to clarify something. I thought I heard you say during your talk this morning that there was no hold time for cats in Michigan.
Right.
Okay, there is a hold time for cats in Michigan that is regulated by the Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development. So I did just want to clarify that in Michigan we do have a hold time. 4 days without identification and 7 days with identification.
Okay, I did a fair amount of research on that, and I thought that it wasn't really about cats. But if it's 4 days, I would really recommend that you look at that and see why you want, particularly for your municipal shelters, to have to spend that kind of money on a fruitless endeavor, because only 1% of the cats are going to be turned back to their owners, and that's probably the 1% who has identification on it. So even with municipal shelters, which the state is paying for, you are wasting tons of millions of dollars holding these cats. It's a fruitless thing to do, whether they go up for adoption or there's a community program for them to go into. So I would seriously look at that policy for the state if you have such policy.
Correct. Yes,
Yeah.
it is a law, and
Yeah.
there are a number of people that are looking at legislation
Yeah,
to try and get that changed.
Yeah, excellent, wonderful. Good luck to you.
I've got two comments. First of all, a good alternative for is the neuter and release. Regarding the cats that go out being unvaccinated, they're going to be exposed to diseases out there. So one of the things we need to take into consideration is, are we putting cats in a position where they're going to die from some disease that they catch?
Well, I think they should be vaccinated, and particularly if they...
Well, they're going to be vaccinated when they're released, but they're going to be out there for how many years?
Well, you know, the
vaccine
thing
is
is
not gonna last
that
forever.
if we're talking about, and I'm talking largely about cats that we consider strays, that are domesticated, you know, I'm not really talking about ferals. I don't know what we can do about retrapping ferals and getting them vaccinated. You know, it's sort of a hit and miss. But certainly there's all kinds of programs that you could get the community involved with, that if Fluffy goes back to ABC community and you have volunteer A in that community. They can pick up Fluffy, once a
think
year
that's
for
an
the
important
vaccines. I think
consideration.
that there's a lot of community involvement that you can get going to keep these animals vaccinated and keep the public and the cats safer.
Yeah, that's
I
really
think
good.
it's a great opportunity for volunteers.
The other real quick comment I said I wanted to say was your comments on the Roman Catholic Church and the persecution of cats. I think is grossly overstated. That was the topic of my thesis. I just got a master's degree in theology, and
If you have 45 minutes, you got to be gross.
yeah, it's a little overstated, I think. But
Yeah.
thank you. Oh yeah, John Parker, a private
Hi.
practitioner in Novi, Michigan.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.